Welcome again. Welcome back to the Audacious brand activation. So very quickly, want to get you up to speed and what to expect over the next weeks. For the next 3 weeks, I will be dropping something into this channel. It could be a video recording, it could be an audio only. And to be honest, I've never done it in this format before. I've never actually delivered this. And why does it matter for you? Because as you are just rediscovering your audacious brand, this is actually being medicine for me. And I'm going to be super frank and honest with you. That when I opened the space, I was feeling anything or nothing but audacious. And it was the medicine I needed to tap into the audacious side of me. And so here we are today, and we're doing this work together because I know that every person in this room with me today, and for those of you who join later, I know there's an audacious side of you that has been hiding. I know that somewhere along the way you've silenced it, knowingly or unknowingly. We're not here to get caught up on the why and get stuck in all of that. We're here to rise above it and choose differently, to embody more of who we are so that the truest, the most aligned, the most ideal clients, collaborators, partners, opportunities will be magnetized towards us because they're magnetized to the authentic, the most authentic self of you in this moment. So in the next 3 weeks in the Audacious Brand Activation, each one is intended to be an activation. 3 drops, 3 different layers, one body of work that I believe is the reason that most people with exceptional skills are still not being seen or paid as much at the level they deserve. This is not just a content series or tips and strategy. This is the work that happens before the strategy, or rather, this is the work that happens behind the strategy. This is that internal layer that determines whether or not your strategy actually works and your messaging actually lands with the right people. Because it can land, but you may be attracting the wrong type of clients. And you may be attracting people who maybe aren't cut out for the work or ready for the work um or are just not the right personality for the work, right? And here's what we're going to be moving through together. Today, we're going to be looking at the conditioning, the deeper layers. Next week, we'll look at the positioning. And finally, there is the declaration, and this is the embodiment that actually shows up. Each activation builds on the last, so please don't skip ahead if you're watching this in the future and you're going back. So if you've ever felt like there's a gap between who you are in the room with your clients behind closed doors and who you allow yourself to be in the public eye. If you feel like there's a gap, this is for you. If you've ever felt like you're producing content that performs well enough but doesn't quite transmit who you actually are, this is for you. If you've ever known privately that you are operating at a level that your public positioning doesn't yet reflect, then this is absolutely for you. So stay in, show up for all 3. Please feel free to share. This is a space. Please, there is no comparison and there is no judgment. My version of Audacity is going to look different to your version of Audacity. The audaciousness happens and only occurs within a specific type, a specific context, and belief systems and worldviews and conditioning. And so none of our audaciousness, our stories, our backgrounds do not and cannot be compared. Okay, so there is no wrong or right in this space. There's no wrong or right in this work. It just is the way it is. period. And this is where being comes in, being who you are versus trying to be something to someone else. Okay, so stay in here. The full picture will only land as you move through all of it. And it is a little bit of an experiment for all of us because we're going to be excavating some old stories or some truths, rather, and we're going to start applying it to our messaging. And we're observing, and that's the experiment. The experiment is happening through observation. We're observing who responds, who reacts. How do I feel when I do it? How does my body react when I'm sharing more of my authentic truth? And that is the invitation for you today. So let's get into the first activation, the first session, and what to expect in activation one. We're starting where we normally like to start, and that's at the root. Okay, not the content, not the branding, not the colors, not the bells and whistles that you see on the top, not the offerings and the pricing. These are all byproducts. This is the tip of the iceberg, and you know that beneath the waterline, the iceberg is 9 times bigger, right? If I think do I remember that correctly? I don't know. But let's say let's say it's 9 times bigger. That part underneath the waterline, that is what's driving up everything else. That is what's creating everything else. What we see on the top is a byproduct of everything else. So if we're only looking at the top without doing the bottom piece, we don't have an iceberg. We just have something that floats, which means it's easily movable, swayable. It can go anywhere, right? So let's look at the conditioning that is driving everything that you do. Because before we can talk about positioning, we can talk about what you're here to claim publicly, right? We need to name what's been quietly keeping you from claiming your worth. And this is where we've tamed ourselves. Okay, and this session is all about like, where have we tamed? Where are we taming? Where am I taming? And almost every high caliber person that I have ever worked with has a version of this. And as I said earlier on, it will look different. Yours will look different to mine. We can resonate and relate. We can empathize with each other and how this may impact our own, or have experienced it to some degree in our own lives. But it doesn't mean like my conditioning or my taming is yours, and you are invited today to explore what that could be for you and where it's showing up in your business, right? Um, so yeah, I'm sharing my version and parts of my story that I haven't really shared before because I think it's going to sound familiar to some of you, and I think that familiarity is going to be useful for you in your own excavation. So um let's dive right in. So Imad, put put yourself in my shoes for a moment. I was 18 years old. Well, I'm 18 years old. I walk into my family business in the importation and distribution business, third generation. Well, now it's third generation. At the time, it was still second generation, or rather, I'm the third generation operating the business. And I did something that obviously no one really expected because it's not really done, right? I went in to seek a job, and I spoke to the managing director at the time, who happens to be my uncle. Um, and he offered me the roles that were available, the vacancies that were open in that moment, right? He's a sales representative, which is basically more like an order taker, this, that, and the other. I didn't take any of the roles on the table. Instead, I created my own. I created my own, and there is no template for this. There's no template. Like, how do you go and create your own job, right? But I just had an intuitive knowing that this is exactly what I need to do. And so I had a conversation with my uncle, and I asked for basically a role that didn't really exist. And that conversation opened a door, and it actually shaped my career, because what I decided to do back then, which was turn around a brand in loss to becoming market leader, is what I do. What I'm being hired right now to do. Companies are hiring me to look at their brand that is in loss, to revamp and get it back into profit and whatever, turn it around. So, um, what most people assume about family businesses is that it's like a membership of privilege, like you have some pass, like an easy route, right? And for me, it was quite the opposite. I spent years inside this my family business where I learned how to tame myself because of that. I learned how I grew, definitely. I developed a lot of skills, but I also learned some kind of taming. I'm building brands, managing key retail accounts across the healthcare industry, leading national health awareness campaigns, lobbying government to introduce life-saving drugs in the national formulary, running corporate branding and CSR activities, the works. Was I qualified for this? I mean, I was studying part-time on the side, marketing marketing strategy, but this was mostly intuitive learning on the field. The scope of the work is significant, but the recognition was not. I was literally paid like the cleaners. I was paid like support staff when I was seeking a salary that reflects my output and my qualifications, which is a level 7 postgraduate from the Chartered Institute of Marketing, I'm told that, well, you didn't go to university. So the comparison to my peers couldn't be made. And the reality was that diploma that I was busting my ass for that didn't count. My results didn't count. The absence of specific piece of paper was the reason. What did that look like? It looked like me hiring graduates from university into my team that I had to train. I had to develop their skills. I put their salaries first over my increases, and each of those hires became evidence that in the logic of the system that I was inside, I am worthless. I am not worthy. I am not deserving. I am worth less than the people I am helping to grow and build. And layered underneath all of that is something much older, and it's a conditioning that started probably from childhood, which told me do not overstep, do not create drama, do not upset anyone, right? Hello, people pleaser. The family business didn't create this pattern. It finds it and it makes use of it. The people pleasing, the quietening, the shrinking, the avoidance of being too much, even though I think at times I would burst into me being too much, which sometimes I was celebrated for because we celebrate individuality, right? But at the same time, no, you need to conform to these sort of sets. You can express individuality within this context. But the taming was not always deliberate. Sometimes it was structural, sometimes it was personal, and it all compounds until it doesn't, right? Until it cracks. And I call this my Kali moment, my Ma Kali moment. The exit that was not so triumphant. It is about swallowing the pill sort of situation. Because when I decided to leave, when I decided to exit the business, when I decided to start like I literally decided not on what's my next move. I decided on restarting life. That's the decision I made. I left corporate, I left the work, I left my family business without any plans. And this was hard because on one side I was super excited for this new and empowered and excited for this new life I was going to build with no plan. But on the other side, I had this depleting disappointment of not continuing the family legacy that everyone expected me to do. Like, and that grief, that ego death of releasing what I have built over there, like the status, the salary, the false sense of security that employment has given me, that employment has given me, even when that employment was consistently undervaluing me, right? So that is my like what I call my Kali moment. It wasn't a clean decision. It wasn't a victory lap. It was basically the destruction of what is false so that what is real can finally start to come out and come into fruition, come into life. So that tamed version slain, and what happened forward, what the steps forward after that, it was not softer at all. It was just more truer, right? So for me, this taming followed me into my business too, and I noticed sometimes in my content, but then I got really good at the content. Um, I felt like the badass in me came out. I felt like the audacious side of me came out. But what I didn't realize is who I was being on sales calls. Because when I started to look back, when I started to review, when I started to study myself, and I really highly recommend that you all do this, you record calls, have sales conversations. This is such good training and it's such a good way of auditing what's going on because you can see your tonality, your body, the words that you use, your posturing and all of that stuff. You can look back at sales conversation and look at like missed opportunities or things that the your prospect would have said that you missed on, you didn't capture or you didn't leverage, which would be like really important for them and their own journey to move forward with you or on their journey in general. So what I noticed when I was studying myself is that I was a complete freaking wallflower. I was the people pleaser in me was just coming out. I would not hold space for the person in front of me, the person on the other side of the screen, when they would go through any discomfort when it came to, for example, looking at the investment of investing, when it looked like building the courage and the stamina to start addressing the things that had been holding them back. Um, and I did a great disservice for my clients in this way. Instead of holding space, I started explaining more and talking more and over explaining what we're going to do and why this is important. And then teaching them how these things work and then justifying the price. And I've seen this happen with everyone. You start justifying the price with like, oh, but like you get this and you get this and you get this. Like adding value like crazy instead of just saying what you need to say calmly, knowingly, with full confidence, and then holding space for that person. I didn't like to see other people in discomfort, and so I would do everything to make them feel comfortable. This not only was coming through my sales calls, it was coming into other types of negotiations and business deals. And I would also see how that was creeping into other areas of my life and relationships. And so when you do this audit, when you zoom out, when you look out from the outside and you look at the energy and you just analyze it as though you would analyze your client, you really start to see things that you wouldn't have seen. And this is the opportunity for you to start changing them. And so this is the pattern that I'm reading in the room, that the taming doesn't stay in the past, it travels, right? It shows up in your content, it shows up in sales conversations, in how offers are named and priced and described. It shows up in the gap between who someone is in the room with their clients and who they allow themselves to be in public. And I've had this said to me, where one of my clients was like, "Wow, the level of depth that you go into and like." It, it's like the personal development of business in a way, and how and like allowing the business is the catalyst for the personal development and healing because it just uncovers so much. And that's what my clients were experiencing behind closed doors, but it is not the positioning I had on the outside, right? And I always say people come to me for their marketing tactics and strategy, but actually there's so much more depth behind what we do. And this actually had me and I'll talk about it probably in the next session, but this had me very confused about who I am and what I do and like what makes me different in the online space, because I was comparing myself and I was competing in the wrong category, where where I am a category of one in my own way, right? And I know there are other people who do things very similar to what I do, but obviously we all have our different approaches to doing that. Um, so yeah, it shows up in that way. And that specific version of taming, the specific version of taming I work on with most oftenly is I recognize it as over justification of pricing, unlike what's in your offerings. I recognize it as over explanation, like what you do, why you do, and because this and because that, and you start to like almost like you go into teaching mode, and over explaining something instead of just saying it, like or you attempt to share your opinion and your point of view, and then because like justifying it and over explaining it instead of just staying it and standing by it, right? So the compulsion to prove rather than to claim. That is the thing. It's the compulsion to prove rather than claim, to educate rather than transmit, to demonstrate competence rather than activate. This is how I recognize it in the online space all the time. And not only in the online space, even with the CEOs and business founders, business owners I work with, when I hear them going into like making a pitch or making a proposal, negotiations, I see this showing up all the time. So it's not just for the online space, it's not just for coaches. I see this across the board, and I see it a lot with academics, which is funny because like I work with a lot of people who are highly academic, and highly intelligent, and because I was always told, well, you don't have a university degree, so you can't be paid as much. I always felt inferior, and so it's funny that now I get to work with a lot of academics and professionals in their field in this way. Such like the irony of that, right? That even without the university degree, I work with the most credentialed credentialed people in the room. So the contradiction of this is not an accident. I recognize in them what I know from the inside. And that's the thing. I'm not just teaching off a book. I'm not just thinking based on what I think I know. I'm teaching it based on true life experience. And the ability to recognize it in others is because I have lived to certain extents parts of it myself. They're overcompensating, they're over teaching, they produce content that is thorough, accurate, well researched, and completely safe. And what happens to safe content? It just blends in, it doesn't stand out, right? And it's safe because I'll tell you why it's safe, because people tell me, what do you mean by it's safe? What do you mean, like, what's wrong with overteaching? Education is neutral. It's factual. It's been proven by other people. You've learned it in other books by other mentors and whatnot. It cannot be easily opposed unless you have a totally different school of thought, right? But perspective, opinion, your personal perspective, that is the kind that requires self-belief to claim publicly. That is vulnerable. It takes some vulnerability and some courage to make a claim, stand by it without having to explain yourself, without having to justify it. And that can be challenged. And that might upset someone who has a different belief, who has learned something differently, right? Um, and I've seen this over and over and over again, and I've seen this with business owners and coaches and healers and therapists who are stagnating in their business, and it's having a direct impact on their revenue and profitability, because neutral marketing that sounds like everyone and everything doesn't attract premium clients. It attracts price shoppers. You're gonna get compared a lot, right? Oh, but like this, you're saying this, but I just spoke to this one, and you're basically saying the same thing. So they start shopping on pricing. But the thing is, if you start to treat your business as a commodity that people shop on price, like buying a bottle of water, right? Even though that can also be a position more in different ways, then you're not gonna attract people who are ready to pay top dollar, right? And through my work and through my studies and through my observation of what moves a high caliber for, like, again, what is high caliber to you? What does that mean for you? Because my high caliber may be different to your high caliber. My premium client may be different to your premium buyer client, okay? So what I can say in general is that a more a high that type of client who's ready to do transformation, who's ready to do the work, they're not just looking for information because information is abundant. They know that they have access to information, right? If you're selling high ticket coaching, for example, high ticket services, it's not information they need. They're looking for results, and they're looking for results from someone who leads. The DIY and these schools and whatnot, they give information. They do educational content that adds value. But you're looking for people who are going to step further. They're looking for people who will tell them the truth. They're looking for someone whose perspective and insight they trust enough to follow. And the thing is that when you soften this leadership, when content is calibrated to comfort everyone, to speak to everyone, to confirm all existing beliefs so that we don't hurt people, we don't upset anyone, i.e., you're looking to be liked by everyone. What is produced is not a brand, but it's basically like, I don't know, a general waiting room. Okay. The audience may save the content, they may comment that it's useful and informative, and then they go to spend $20,000 with someone else who has half their depth because that person said the thing that was not quite said by the industry, by other people in the industry like yourself, who's keeping it safe, who's just educating and regurgitating the same content and different branding, basically. They claimed the position that was still being softened by someone else. So this gap between the private version and the public version is not a personality issue, it's a positioning issue, and it's a revenue problem that we need to address right away. The thing is, your personality is there, but the authentic version of you, the one that is assertive, that claims perspective and opinion, that leads, is not showing up. They only show up behind closed doors, and we need to close this gap so that people can see the brilliance of the true brilliance, the brilliance of what you bring to the table, right? And the way I look at it is this has both when we talk about magnetism, okay, when we talk about magnetism, we talk about client attraction. Um, it has two sides. To magnetize something means that you need to repel something else. So if the wrong people, if the misaligned, there's no right and wrong, but let's say the misaligned or the not so ideal clients or not so ideal people cannot be repelled. If they cannot be repelled, it means the right people cannot be attracted. And if you have a brand that is trying to comfort everyone and confirm all beliefs that your brand is basically standing for nothing. And if you stand for nothing, you don't sell because people don't recognize, like this is the brand, this is the brand I can get behind, right? The and this is coming from the taming and the conditioning, and it's trained you like it did me to fear the repulsion, to fear losing people, to fear being rejected, to fear being not liked. So when you start to really share your point of views, you're gonna have people who are going to oppose you, reject you, not like it, right? And that's okay. Let them do that. Or that may trigger them and say, whoa, there's a different perspective I didn't see. And then you may even convert them, right? But your job is to speak to the people who are already converted and who think like you. And this activation begins the work of reframing it, right? Repulsion is not failure. Repulsion is the filter working correctly. So when people reject you, ghost you, and whatnot, instead of like getting upset about it and trying to go for them, go for them, go for them, think about why they are rejecting it. Okay. Oftentimes it's not, yes, okay, there's the pricing, there's the offer, there's the messaging, there's the position on how you blah, 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 blah. There are all of these variables, right? Because this is not black and white, it's very nuanced. Okay, I'm giving you the activation over here is to start getting those juices flowing and helping you to excavate all of the nuance that is relevant to your situation. Um, but also regarding the repulsion, is the filter working correctly? It also can signal that the people you're speaking to, the people who just rejected you rejected the offering or the concept or the idea or the point of view, whatever, may just not be your aligned clients that you should be going after. All right. So let's start looking at your content. Look at your content over the last week or two and compare compare read it from like as like an outsider, like you're auditing it, like as though you're auditing it. Feel the energy in which you show up in your coaching calls, in your offerings. If you have a retail store, like in your retail store when you're with clients, like how do you show up there? And what's the energy over there that people just love the experience with you? They have results, they enjoy it, whatever feedback they've given you, and then look at your content and compare that energy, and you start to see if there's a difference. Audit it, like audit your content. What's the word? Like remove yourself and just see it as it is. See it for what it is. Okay. See if you can feel the difference. Are you giving your audience an opportunity to know what it's like to be inside your work, your paid work world? Okay. And here are some questions I'm gonna drop. And I also drop them in the homework. Where have you softened? For example, not wanting to call anyone out. For example, defaulting to generic labels in your content, right? We tend to do use very generic labels like people pleasing, self-judgment, this, that, whatever. Making exceptions to your own terms and conditions for the sake of a sale, for example. This is all softening or bending over backwards, right? To please someone else, whether that be one person or your audience in general. Where have you apologized or asked for permission? I see this a lot in content. For example, oh, sorry, long post, or in videos, oh, I just want to come here on because, like almost asking, seeking permission. It's almost like an apology for showing up. Sorry if this might trigger you, but, right, um, these are ways that you apologize or ask for permission instead of just stating the thing. It's like, when someone asks you, hey, can I say something? Like, say it, like, just say the thing, right? Where have you made yourself easier to digest, to become more palatable, to become more easy, not harsh, not what's the word? It slipped my mind. But basically not saying the full truth in the way you would like to say it, holding back certain insights or point of views just in case it offends someone, regurgitating teaching material instead of transmitting your actual perspectives. Okay, so look at your audit in these ways. The audit starts to if you'll start to see, and if you don't, that's fine. And you can also get an audit done by me, and I'll help you look at these things. The audit is designed to name the specific location of the taming in your business, right? So this gap that I'm seeing often now has a specific address, let's say. So we know like where it's coming from, and now we know how to shift it. We don't want to get caught up in the what and the how and the why, and then we don't need to get into the story of that. We don't need to start attaching meaning to it. Like it doesn't matter. What the audit is here to do is to show you where it's happening, if it's happening, where and how, to what degree, to what level, what do I need to do to change this instead? What are the actions? Who am I being, right? You and basically like this is the asset, and I want you to bring it and share into the chat before we go into activation 2, which will be next week, because that's exactly where we're going to like next. Okay, so again, if you're not sure where your taming is showing up, you can book a private messaging and content audit where we can reveal these things together, and I'll drop the link for that too. See you soon. I'm looking forward to your shares.